Welcome to ENside Politics, our weekly podcast on 2 or 3 or maybe 4 things you need to know about San Antonio politics. I'm Greg Jefferson, politics editor of the San Antonio Express News, and I'm joined today by City Hall reporters Megan Rodriguez, Molly Smith. Good morning.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Excellent. So I wanted to talk this morning about Mayor Gina Ortiz Jones' kind of complicated relationship with the Spurs arena. Now, we know that she did a lot of questioning of the use of public funds to help build an arena for the Spurs at Hemisphere before the the election 2 weeks ago. She never sided against the proposition, Prop B, but she raised a lot of what I think were legitimate questions about use of county venue tax revenue for the project. But she never said she was against it. In fact, she said she wanted, some kind of deal to bring about an arena. Now, Prop B squeaks by with 52% of voter support. And the question was, what was next for Mayor Jones? How was she going to approach this issue? And we really didn't know in the days after the election. You know, she turned up at the Spurs election night watch party, kind of weirdly stayed for like 15 minutes, didn't, talk to Peter Holt, the Spurs managing partner, didn't address the crowd and just kind of moved on, and nobody was quite sure what she was doing there or what that signaled. There were, 1 or 2 news conferences in the days after. She showed up, seemed to say kind of kumbaya-ish things about the Spurs votes and the coming project, but
let's all collaborate.
Right? Yeah. I mean, so kind of fuzzy at best. Now it looks like we've got a little bit of specificity. Molly, you are working with your colleague Madison Eisler on a story, kind of looking at how the mayor is kind of handling the arena. So let's start with the 30,000 foot view.
Well, like you said, she was somewhat quiet in the days after the election, and that she goes to the Texas Tribune Fest in Austin. Uh-huh. This was on November 14th. And she takes everyone by surprise and says, I think we should try to exempt San Antonio residents from the county venue tax. And this is the county's tax on hotel rooms and short-term rental cars. And the revenue that the county will generate from that, $811 million, is making up their portion of their arena contribution. Mm-hmm. She's sitting next to Judge Peter Sakai when she says this.
Did he wince?
D, I think, was taken aback through his spokesperson. He said that she had never mentioned this to him before. That was the first time he was hearing it. Mm-hmm. Our understanding is that the mayor had first made mention of this the day prior when she was in the closed door portion of a city council meeting, said to her city council colleagues, the city manager, she was interested in pursuing this. A lot of questions at the time. This was only a couple days ago, but questions of, is this even possible? And we've learned that city attorney Andy Segovia has informed the mayor and the council that this is in fact not permissible. So that was one thing she wanted. And I would guess it would to make that happen. First of all, it seems like it would be a terrible precedent for the county, at least from the county's point of view, for the city of San Antonio, which is by far the largest city in Bexar County, to say no, we should be exempt from some taxes. We'll happily participate in some, but not others. So that seems like a bad idea. But I think in order to do that, to do what the mayor wants to do, you'd have to go to the state legislature and get an act of the legislature to make that happen. And that seems unlikely. Yeah. And it's worth noting that her whole reason for bringing this up is it stems from criticism of how the Spurs campaign and some council members messaged Proposition B to voters. And that message was largely San Antonio residents aren't going to pay anything, and this is tourists are going to pay. Mm-hmm. That's an overly simplified argument, but so it's her kind of striking back against that. And so it is a bit of she hasn't had the best relationship with Spurs executives, and so this isn't going to help, even though it's not going to actually result in anything.
Plus, I'm guessing we don't actually know how many San Antonians take staycations and how much they spend and how much tax they pay. So we're doing this with, we're talking about this with not a lot of information.
Right. She has also, in that same Texas Tribune panel, she reiterated calls that she's made since she took office, where she'd like revenue sharing with the Spurs for parts of the arena. So that would be ticket sales, concessions, naming rights. That is something that they have said is basically a non-starter.
Right. So it's not altogether clear to me why it's a non-starter. Do you what's your understanding of it? I know that Bobby Perez has talked about this in public forums. He's the legal counsel for the Spurs. What's he said?
He is. One of the main things they've said is that they need this money to be paying back the debt that they will issue for their contribution. They're paying $500 million toward the arena's $1.3 billion cost. They've committed to cover any cost overruns. They are also on the hook to facilitate $1.4 billion of development around the arena, because the property tax revenue off of that new development is going to pay back a large portion of the city's $489 million contribution. So he just said they need to have that capital to do these things, that they're taking on significant risk. There's also been a bit of an argument about how revenue sharing works within the NBA, where larger and smaller teams are kind of giving revenue, and so it's just that this isn't feasible, and that they're not willing to entertain this.
And when they're not willing to entertain it, is that for any amount or a specific amount that she has posed?
For any amount, that they're just they are not interested in revenue sharing, and they've said they cannot do that. She has given this example of this deal between Miami-Dade County and the Miami Heat and this private company for a naming rights deal, in which the deal is worth $117 million over 17 years, and the county is getting a large chunk of that, $83 million. So she will say there are examples of this being possible, and we need to ask for as much as we can.
Right.
It remains to be seen whether there's enough support amongst her council colleagues for that. Some of them have said, Socorro has made this argument to us, so has Marina Aldrete-Gavito. They've basically said that if we demand revenue sharing from the Spurs, this will set a bad precedent for companies looking to do business here, because they're going to be afraid that we too will ask them for a cut of the revenue. And that's not what she's asking for. She's specifically asking it for the arena because the city is putting up a large share of public dollars.
Right. So, okay. So she's, the long and short of it is she's still talking about revenue sharing, even though the Spurs have said it's non-starter and can't happen. And we have a term sheet that City Council approved in August for an arena deal that definitely does not include revenue sharing. Why is she talking about that if you have a term sheet?
The term sheet is non-binding. So she will say that there's a lot of remaining things to be hashed out. But it's also hard to say because, yes, it's a non-binding term sheet, but the amounts of the contributions have been determined, and it does not seem that those amounts are going to be reworked. So, for example, if we don't get revenue sharing, the city is not going to say, oh, actually, we're going to reduce the contribution from 489 to X amount. But she's saying there are remaining parts of this deal that need to be hashed out. And so this is an opportunity to try to push for more.
Right. Now, it seems like for the mayor, like the most obvious place to go would be the community benefits agreement, which is the $75 million that the Spurs have put up basically to the city to use however city council sees fit over a 30-year period. Now, there's been talk of using it for early childhood education and pre-K. But I mean, it could be for anything. Is she talking at all about increasing that funding under that agreement, or just leaving it at $75 million?
She hasn't talked about that. That's not one of the things she's really focused on. I think council members are more focused on coming up with a plan for getting community input on how residents would like this money to be used. I think the mayor's really focused on kind of still demanding the revenue sharing and still pushing for this independent economic impact analysis. This was kind of for her the main sticking point back in August of why she was one of 4 folks who voted to delay negotiations with the Spurs. 7 people voted for that, so she was in kind of the losing camp. But she's wanted this new economic analysis to determine if the city is getting quote unquote a good deal. It's also a bit kind of confusing on where they are on that. She will say city manager Eric Walsh is putting this together. She's getting council input. We have asked the city about it, and we talked to Councilwoman Kaur about it. And we're hearing that there is going to be this analysis, but it's an analysis for cost of services. So, for example, the cost of providing security or traffic control.
So less about the deal itself.
Less about the deal itself. So it is unclear if this analysis that she wants is even happening.
So there's disagreement between the mayor and the city manager over what's being studied. Is that it?
I don't know if I would say disagreement, but it seems like people are on different pages. And so I'm not sure if the city is moving forward with the analysis that she would like.
Right. So, I mean, it could be that Eric Walsh feels like the city's already done an economic impact analysis. Back in the summer, his office released a study by CLS International, which turned out to be, after Councilwoman Terry Castillo did just a little Googling, really turned out to be majority owned by Sixth Street Partners, which is a San Francisco-based private equity firm that also happens to be a Spurs investor.
And they own about, I want to say they own about 20% in the Spurs, so it's not a small sliver.
They've got a seat at the table with the Spurs, and they're talking. They're the ones producing the economic, or they're basically a firm they've invested heavily in is the one making that statement. So I think that's why the mayor is seeking an economic, an independent. When we say an independent economic impact report, that's why. Like, that's it. But it's unclear if that's actually in the works, what she has in mind, and if so, when it's coming. Right now, she's also. It seems like we're talking about a non-binding term sheet that she's saying, okay, this because it's non-binding, this deal is really not done, and we can renegotiate, we can take the talks that the Spurs and the city had over the summer that led to the term sheet and build on them and get more for the city. That seems to be what she's saying. The opposing view, I think, is like, if those who don't want to take that route and just want to get a deal, I think their argument would be, it's like, look, a lot of work went into the term sheet. Yes, it's non-binding, but it was non-binding because we were waiting on the election results. And now that we know that the county venue tax, which the term sheet was predicated on, like, you had to have this election, Prop B had to pass in order for this deal to work out. That happened. And so now we just have to kind of fill in the details. But that doesn't seem to be the mayor's orientation at all. And we've also got a non-binding term sheet with the San Antonio Missions minor league baseball team. And my understanding is that's coming up now.
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So in 2024, the then mayor Ron Nierenberg and the city council approved a deal with the Missions, and and the county for a new ballpark near San Pedro Creek Culture Park. It's a $160 million facility. The city is putting up $34 million towards that. It was also a non-binding deal. There's some agreements that still need to be worked out. But right now, it's really on developer Weston Urban to start the design phases for apartments, hotels, new development around this site. Because similar to the Spurs deal, this is structured in that property tax revenue from new development is going to be used to repay the bond debt that this county city joint development authority is going to issue to pay for it. And the mayor was at last week. She was doing one of her monthly town halls in District 6. District 6 is the home of Wolf Stadium, which is where the Missions currently play. And she had this offhand remark where she was talking about the Missions deal and said, oh, by the way, that's a non-binding term sheet, kind of signaling that she thinks there's also things that they could do to kind of relook at that deal. In that deal, the city did not ask for a lot. One of the big sticking points was that there's an apartment complex called the Soap Factory. It's one of what we would say is the few naturally occurring affordable housing complexes in the area where lower income folks can actually afford to live there, can afford to live downtown, and it'll be demolished to make room for this new development. And the city did not seek initially any assistance to help folks who live there. It was only when the community kind of pressured them that the city said, oh, we should ask Weston Urban to help us give folks relocation stipends. So the city really, I don't think, asked for much. They are paying a much smaller sliver of the total cost, but she has signaled that she would like to relook at parts of that deal.
Interesting.
And even once those stipends were approved, if I'm remembering correctly, community members were still kind of concerned about how small they were.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, there were still complaints about the size of them and then also how they were being issued.
So the mayor at one point, going back to the Spurs agreement, was talking about, hey, we could have a second public vote because Prop B, which voters had their say on 2 weeks ago, it looked like this was going to be the only part of public financing for Spurs Arena that was going to go to a public vote. And what she was suggesting was, no, I mean the city's portion, which will be bond debt repaid by, property tax revenue that's generated on that site or around it, rents, all kinds of fees. That didn't need to go to a public vote, but she wanted it. She was talking about doing just that. I think, what was her slogan? You have a memory.
Oh, yes. If you pay twice, you should vote twice.
Right. Is she talking about that at all?
No, she has not mentioned that. She told our colleague Madison in an interview this week that that's not something. She's still open to it, but she has these kind of more immediate focuses with the revenue sharing, negotiating other parts of the deal.
Yeah.
So open question of whether she's going to bring this back. We've talked about this a lot on this podcast, but she does not, to do that, she can't unilaterally call for an election. She would need the city council to vote, and she would need 5 folks to vote alongside her.
Yeah.
It does not seem like she has 5 people or anywhere close. I think one concern of council members who were even skeptical of the deal, Rick Galvan, for example, voted with her to delay negotiations. But he has raised the concern of that elections are costly and that is it really worth paying to do another election when we already had this vote?
Yeah.
And should we be putting our energy on other things?
Right. Do we know how much council support she has to even be talking about reopening talks with the Spurs to get more than the city negotiators managed to get during?
We don't know, but I would say based on voting blocks and how the vote over the term sheet in August worked out, that 7-4 vote, that there's still a good majority who are happy with the deal. For example, Councilman Mark White, Councilwoman Misty Spears, Councilwoman Phyllis Villagran, Marina Alderete Gavito, Socorro, Ivelisse Mesa Gonzalez. I mean, there is a majority kind of of the more kind of pro-business council members who I think this is a great deal, and who a lot of them I think are really motivated by this fear that the Spurs will leave if we keep stalling the deal, or if we don't
Push them too hard.
if we push them too hard.
Hurt their feelings.
It's worth noting that the Spurs have never outwardly mentioned anything about leaving, but that is a
Right.
big concern by a majority of council members.
And you can't just flip a switch and be gone. It's
It would take some time.
Yeah, and the approval of NBA. Like there are a lot of factors.
And they would have to say that they're leaving, and then they could come back and keep renegotiating deals. So, yeah, it's not like the mayor is going to say, we're going to not give this money unless we do revenue sharing, and the Spurs are going to say, we're out of here next season.
Yeah. Now, moving on to the more prosaic topic of bond debt, which we always love to talk about. Okay, so you can't just drop an arena into the middle of the hemisphere and just like pray for the best. Like hope it all works out as far as traffic goes and public safety and all that. You have to build stuff and change things around it. To do that, you probably need to float a bond, sell it to the bond markets. But first you have to get voter approval to do that. Where's the city at in that process?
So the city has said that the first phase of infrastructure improvements to support the arena and also the surrounding sports and entertainment district, best known as Project Marvel, would cost...
Which you hate that phrase, don't you? Yeah, like I can tell you recoil from saying it. Like, what do you have against Project Marvel?
Well, we were trying not to talk about Project Marvel so much on this podcast.
Well, largely it's because you hate the phrase.
I don't know
Like
about
you
that.
have a special hatred of Project Marvel. But go ahead.
They've said it would cost as much as $250 million to pay for this infrastructure, and it could take multiple phases. And the interesting kind of thing to look at moving forward is what they're going to do when it comes to the next bond, because their bonding capacity is significantly reduced. Their most recent bond, which was put up in 2022, was for a record $1.2 billion. They now say, because of the cooling housing market and property tax cuts passed by the Texas legislature, they are looking at a bonding capacity of $500 million. Potentially $700 million, but it's been really reduced in half. And so if you have the $250 for this infrastructure, it's going to eat up a large portion of that bond. And there's a lot of residents who have a long list of other neighborhood projects they would like to see on a bond. And the mayor really wants to put flood control on the bond in the wake of the the Vital Creek flooding. 11 folks died in that flooding. 2 more died in the area of kind of very deadly flooding in the city. And she said there's a lot of outstanding flood improvements that we just have not gotten to. When we went to a lot of these community town halls to solicit feedback on Project Marvel, one of the things you heard from a lot of folks was, yes, maybe this sounds great, but there's so much stuff we need. You know, my neighborhood needs this thing, and flooding, you know, it was happening over the summer after this deadly flooding. And so I think there are a lot of residents who want this to be on the bond.
So there could be a lot of tension between having nice things and having necessary things. I mean, so the earliest, yeah, exactly. And the earliest the city could call such an election is May.
Yeah.
Is that likely to happen or no?
I think it's unlikely based off of comments that Assistant City Manager Jeff Coyle made at the SA Metro Chamber event on the 14th. And he basically said that it would be very ambitious. And if they did do a May timeline, they'd have to call that election in February, that it would bypass the normal community engagement that they do to get input on what folks want to see as these bond projects.
Yeah. Now, normally the way these work is the mayor or city council? They basically appoint working groups to develop, to kind of vet projects to include in a bond package. Is that likely to happen again? I would assume so.
I would think yes. I mean, the mayor has said that she wants the process of whatever projects go on a bond to be as transparent as possible. And she thinks that that's going to be key for getting voter approval for however many kind of propositions on the ballot, one of which could be the proposition for parts of that downtown arena funding. And the city has said, or at least they were saying this over the summer, former Assistant City Manager Laura Houston had said at a couple of these, that if you don't like Project Marvel, like the way that you can kill this project is to vote against the infrastructure. And then she would caveat with that.
I bet Eric Walsh will love.
She would then say quickly, we don't want that to happen, but that is the way you kill this.
Yeah.
And that, the city has not answered any questions about if bond debt, if voters did not approve them taking out bond debt to cover this infrastructure, how they would pay for those costs and what the plan would be.
So when Jeff Coyle talks about needing more time for public engagement, not to be cynical, but could that also mean we need more time to figure out the politics here?
Yes.
It's going to be a big fight. And having it right, because it's not like Prop B won and it wasn't a smash hit. I mean, it was they won by 52% with 52% of the vote after a $7 million plus dollar campaign. So, I mean, to me, it's pretty clear that this would have lost had it not been for a really extraordinarily well-funded campaign. So the city must be looking at that and saying, okay, well, maybe having another election 6 months later is not such a great idea. You need a little more time to talk with voters about it, that kind of thing. Now, let's tell you what. Let's put this to rest. We'll put a pin in it for a bit, because there's we could go on, as you know, both of you. We could go on for hours. Days. We could do marathon Project Marvel podcast, but we're not going to do that. What I'd like to talk about is a couple of really good stories, Megan, you've done on how the Trump administration's campaign against DEI in all its forms has kind of come to roost with the city of San Antonio. So kind of walk us through what's happened.
Yeah, there's a few city-specific programs. Obviously, we're seeing this at the state and national level. There are various programs that have benefited minority and women-owned businesses at kind of those levels of government as well that kind of affect us. But our local programming that San Antonio has put in place is also kind of shifting. The one that I think people would maybe be most familiar with is the SABETA program, which is the Small Business Economic Development Advocacy Program, which was developed in the early 90s to basically try to get more engagement of minority and women-owned businesses in city contracting opportunities. There was this concern that there was maybe some racial racism that could have led to
they were excluded for decades.
Yes. And that's kind of with all of these types of programming. There's this idea that there was maybe some disparity and that needed to be relieved. And so this program has always been there to kind of help and boost those communities. It's shifted many times over the years, but this most recent shift is a direct result of the Trump administration. As you might remember, there were a flurry of executive orders in January, a few of them targeting DEI programs, and city really didn't know how that would affect its programming until recently in September. They kind of abruptly and quietly pulled the last little bit of a boost that this SABETA program gave to minority and women-owned businesses. As a result, they were told that if they didn't take out programs that kind of benefited to the exclusion of others, folks by their national origin, their race, their gender, that they could lose their federal grant funding. And not just for a specific program they're working on, but just across the city overall, which the city's budget, for example, in FY26 has $150 million in federal grants across the city. And so it's no small thing when the government says you could be out of compliance then you could lose these dollars. And so city pulled back this part of the program that basically required in certain contracts, there's stipulations, but in certain contracts, prime contractors that work with the city would have to have up to 40% of their work completed by subcontractors from minority and women-owned businesses. Now, during the last overhaul in December, that kind of targeted some points for other contracting, pulled away basically a competitive edge that minority and women-owned businesses had at that point.
Did that play out in council?
Yes,
right, okay.
It did.
So,
that one did in December, and this one did not.
Right. So the situation we have is like in December, you have this big public fight at city council over these changes.
Over a year and a half of discussion and
a great wailing and gnashing of teeth, and it's all or a lot of it's kind of playing out in public view, and then the city decides, for fear of losing federal funding, to just kill the program outright. And that's done without any kind of city council.
To kill this part of the program, I should say.
Right. So it's Sabeda, it exists.
Will still continue to help small businesses. That's what the city keeps saying, is that
any kind of race-conscious approach, gender or race consciousness is not going to work.
Exactly. That's fully stripped out of it at this point, even though that was like kind of the initial goal.
So you kill that, and it doesn't get a council vote. Why not?
Exactly. So city spokesman said that basically there's flexibility in the ordinance to not have to go for a vote for every change. Like they keep saying this is still, like, these contracting goals are still there for small businesses. Many of the minority and women-owned businesses that benefited from them before could still potentially benefit from these contracting goals now because they're a small business, and those will still be implemented and placed on prime contractors. So it's kind of yet to be seen, like, how many will kind of be shed because of this. But yes, so that's kind of the logic, is that it didn't require a vote. Basically, council talked in a closed door session shortly before the city manager, Eric Walsh, put out a memo that basically said, we are stripping this. This was at the beginning of September. The first public meeting that happened about it was at the end of October. That was under the Sabeda Advisory Committee, and they are basically appointed by the mayor and council. But not a lot of people know that this committee exists. It's not live streamed like a lot of the other items. Like the city council meetings are live streamed. They're more accessible to people, and that's usually where some of these kinds of updates have gone through in the past. But it was definitely a lot quieter this time around. There weren't a lot of public input sessions in across the city as this was happening. It was kind of done as a quick change of, we just need to be in compliance. We cannot be out of compliance, is kind of what the city's take is.
Do you mean how many contracts last year, for example, how many contractors received kind of beneficial treatment because they were women or minority owned?
Yes. So these subcontracting goals are only applied to, well, first off, the Sabeda ordinance only applies to certain contracts, like things dealing with like water or like sewer or electrical emergency services. Like those are not applicable under the Sabeda ordinance. And then the subcontracting goals are even another subset of that. Like not every contract will have it. It's basically if there's something super niche that they, in theory, the city believes is like too hard to ask a company to try to find a minority or woman-owned business that does this specific thing, then they're not going to make you do it because it's just like a niche item and it's a specialty, and they know that that's going to be too difficult to find, like even this other smaller minority group within it. So with all that considered, there were 121 solicitations that even were, the Sabeda ordinance was applied. That's just kind of like, that could be small business benefits or race and gender consciousness. And then these subcontracting goals that we're talking about today, 62 contracts had these. That doesn't mean that only 62 companies benefited from them, because with any prime contracting, they could have multiple subcontractors that were minority or women-owned that benefited from it. But that's how many contracts we're talking about.
So first they came for the small businesses, and then they came for the artists. Right. So So let's talk about the grants program.
Yes.
But,
so once again, this change in the federal grant assurances, as they're called, they're basically the rules that the city has to follow in order to keep its federal grant funding, applied not only to contracting, but also to grant recipients. And so the city's arts and culture department since 2018 had a culturally specific grant program, as they called it, that basically kind of was there to promote or to help nonprofit organizations that were really geared towards certain cultures, highlighting certain cultures, whether that be Latino or African American or Native American. They had kind of like these several groups that could, if you had like leadership in it and or like that was like your primary goal was kind of promoting these minority groups, that you were eligible for these dollars that could be used to help your operations. Essentially, you could put it toward folks' pay or programming, things like that. It was pretty open to how you wanted to use it. There were 11 nonprofits that had already been selected and told like you're going to get XYZ number of dollars. There was basically $800,000 kind of split amongst those 11 organizations that was going to be divvied out. And this is all coming down in September that they say, actually, we are going to have to pull that back. Technically the money had not been handed over yet because it was for fiscal year 2026, which we just started on.
But I assume they were.
But they planned for the dollars.
Right.
Like
so
these
their budget making. Yeah.
Exactly. So it sent these organizations kind of scrambling. In some cases, people had to let go staff, had to cut back on program budgets. Not all of them necessarily are going to feel that change because they were able to kind of shift things around. It's going to be felt more on the staff end for many of these organizations. But that shift really did send a lot of them scrambling. And also there was another artist grant that kind of similar to the SPADA program gave some scoring points to organizations that were to artists who were minorities. And that had to be pulled away as well. And so as far as the grant program that I was just talking about regarding culturally specific, the city is trying to kind of make a new grant opportunity for people to apply to. Obviously, those 11 have no guarantee of getting this. Right. It has to be a fully new program.
Who were some of the 11?
Yes, yeah. So there obviously 11. There was the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center and the Guadalupe Cultural Arts were a couple of them that I actually talked to. And when I was talking about folks who kind of saw some of those changes in their programming, Guadalupe Cultural Arts was the one that really had to cut back on some of their program budgets across the board. And now they're down to 11 full-time staff members, 3 part-time staff members as a result of this. Esperanza Peace and Justice Center was also an organization that felt like they were actually able to make do for now, but are worried that if they don't get a cut of the pie and this next time around, they're going to have to reassess and kind of think about what they're going to do next.
So there's a new grants program that might give them a shot?
Yes. So these organizations are, it looks like they're probably all applying to it. They're all eligible to apply to it still. Basically, it takes away, though, this stipulation that, these like 7 or so groups are the only ones that like can, or groups that benefit these particular minority groups can apply to. It's open to anyone now. Like it's still meant for organizations that promote like arts and culture, but it's any arts and culture. Like the city is not going to put stipulations on that. It's basically more free for folks to be jumping in, and it's to be in compliance with this, essentially. But it'll operate much in the same way. Like organizations can get up to $150,000, and they can use it again as like operational money for their program or for their staffing.
So just take it more colorblind.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly.
All right. So we're going to leave it there for this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Peter Sakai, I was going to say super exciting, and without being ironic at all, I was going to say super exciting race between Ron Nirenberg and Peter Sakai, and then thought of how weird that sounded. Super excited Anyway, it's going to be a heated race, I think, and we'll be talking about it next week. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, I mean, you're here anyway. Like, you're just hanging out in the newsroom, so you might as well be here. You could be there, but you could be here too. So anyway, thanks a lot. And thank you for joining us. If you have not signed up for the ENside Politics newsletter, it is way better than it used to be. Drop down to show notes, click on the thing, and sign up for it. And we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.